Hey, period 5. We are moving on to chapter 12. I couldn't let our 6-year-old have all the fun with the drawing, so this is my representation of a church, and you'll find out this is the new setting that we are going to. So turn to chapter 12, page 140, and listen and follow along as I read. The church was silver. It is impossible, Rod Donovan thought, as he drove slowly up the winding mountain road past the few small stores, the sprinkling of shabby adobe houses toward the shining structure on the hillside before him. It must be worry, he thought, and the lack of sleep. My mind must be slipping. I'm seeing things. Nobody builds churches out of silver. And then he drew closer and saw that it was aluminum, a prefab building which might originally have been intended for a storehouse. Somehow the congregation must have acquired the pieces and fitted them together, and mounted them with a steeple of some other more common material which had been painted white. It was the morning sunlight which had given the construction the illusion of grandeur, glancing off the metal walls with an iridescent brilliance. An omen, Rod thought hopefully, of what can be accomplished with nothing. The comparison was too labored to be comforting. He did not let himself dwell upon the subject. He parked the car at the side of the road, opened the glove compartment, and took out the pistol. Rod, who had never handled a firearm before, had spent 20 minutes working out the mechanics of loading it before he was satisfied that he had this accomplished correctly. Now he sat, weighing the deadly black object on the palm of his hand, trying to decide upon the best thing to do with it. His first impulse was to slide it into his trouser pocket, for the simple reassurance that its presence would give him. It seemed impossible, however, that he could carry it there without detection, for would not a concealed weapon be the first thing that would be looked for by any man or men who would be meeting him? And once the weapon had been located and taken from him, he would, for all practical purposes, be rendered as helpless as Marianne herself. No, it was better to trust to luck for the moment, and hope that the pistol could be worked into the situation at some later time when its presence would be more crucial. He glanced quickly about the interior of the car in search of a hiding place. The glove compartment was too obvious. So was the trash receptacle, with the added disadvantage that its position on the far right of the car would prevent its being reached by anyone in the driver's seat. His eyes traveled downward, pausing as they reached the torn spot in the upholstery where the spur of one of Jay's cowboy boots had snagged and caught. Bending forward, Rod investigated the tear. The material was old, and the rip lengthened easily under his fingers. When the hole was large enough, he thrust the pistol in beneath the cover itself, forcing it back into the springs. Then, with a sigh of satisfaction, he drew the cloth together again as well as he could, got out of the car, and went into the church. On first view, the building appeared to be completely empty. After the glare of the outside, the church interior was dark and quiet. The lack of insulation and the open doorway brought the cold inside, where it lay, layer upon layer, untouched by the thin rays of the winter sun. At the front of the church, candles gleamed dimly, and a lone skylight, half covered with snow, admitted enough light to illuminate the clumsy, hand-carved crucifix which hung over the altar. Straight-backed chairs shoved out of alignment gave evidence of the fact that there had been an early service, which had been attended by at least a few shivering worshippers. Drawing his overcoat more tightly around him, Rod glanced at the luminous hands of his watch. It was not yet 1. He was early. Marian teased him sometimes about the fact that he was always early for things. At the thought of his wife, he again saw her face as he had seen it last, raised to his with a look of entreaty which was almost desperation. "Rod, I want to come too. I want to come with you." "Marian, no," he had answered her firmly, trying not to let his own emotion show in his voice. "You stay here with the boys. Your coming would accomplish nothing. It would only complicate things." "No, it wouldn't. You might need me. What will they do when they realize that you don't have the money?" Her eyes were wide and frightened. "They might hurt you." "Not in a church, dear. I'm to meet them in a church, remember? And this is Sunday. There will be people around, a whole congregation." He had intended the words for comfort, but he had spoken them with sincerity. He had not envisioned a small mission church with its one early morning service over, as dark and empty as it might have been on a typical weekday. Besides, I don't intend to let them know that I don't have the money, he added gently. Not at any rate until they have taken me to Mary Ann. And after that, well, I am not unarmed. Whatever happens, I have Jack's pistol. He should not have said this. He saw her face tighten. Oh, Rod, you shouldn't be doing this. The police should be going. You've never fired a gun in your life. You must take someone with you. Let's call Steve Kirtland. For an instant, he was tempted. Then he shook his head. I told the man on the phone that I would come alone. You heard me tell him. If he sees I have someone with me, he may think I am breaking my word. He may not speak to me at all, and the whole thing will be for nothing. This argument got through to her. She accepted it grudgingly. When you talk to him, when you learn anything, you will call me, you'll let me know? As soon as I possibly can, dear. You're to meet him at 1 o'clock. If I don't hear from you by 3, I'm calling the police, Rod. No, give me longer than that. Say until 5. Let me have 4 hours. Until 4, no longer. If I don't hear by 4, I will know that something has happened. She had clung to him hard for a moment, and standing there, his arms about her, Rod was filled, as he often was, with perplexity at the thought of Jack Paget, who could detach himself so completely from all bonds of emotion and walk away and leave his family without a glance behind him. Now, in the quiet of the church, he drew a slow breath and squared his shoulders. I, Rodney, take thee, Marian. Only a matter of months ago he had spoken these words, but from that moment on they had become a deep and intricate part of him. Rodney Donovan was not a big man or a handsome one. He was not clever or charming or witty or financially successful. He was a slight balding, nearsighted man with a gentle face, but he had taken his vow solemnly, amending it in his own mind. I, Rodney, take thee, Marian, thee and thy children, and all the problems and joys that go with them, for better and for worse, as long as we all shall live. The sound of a footstep brought him out of his reverie, which is a daydream. Turning, he saw the man in the leather jacket who had moved out of the shadows. For a moment, Rod was not certain that this was the person for whom he had been waiting. Short, dark, square-set, with a swarthy complexion. He could have been any Mexican villager, stopping in the empty church for a few moments of quiet meditation. And then he spoke, and Rod's hesitation vanished. For it was the same voice as that on the telephone, soft, accented, terribly familiar. You are waiting for someone? Slowly Rod nodded. I'm here for my daughter. You have come alone? You can see that I have. Rod kept his voice level. Where is Mary Ann? She is all right. You will see her shortly. The man's eyes shifted. First, the money. First, my daughter, Rod said firmly. We do not argue about this, Mr. Donovan. I make the rules here. The man's voice was cold. The money first, please. You have it with you? First, Rod insisted, I want to see Mary Ann. I hold the cards here, I think, Mr. Donovan. The girl is more important to you than the money is to me. I can walk out of here now, and you will never see me again, me or your daughter. I will be losing nothing. You will be losing $60,000, Rod said quietly. For a moment they stood, weighing each other in silence. The man was frowning. You have it with you? The entire amount? Every cent of it, Rod lied stolidly. You are carrying it now? Of course not. I wouldn't be that foolish. It is locked in the trunk of my car. I have hidden the trunk key. You will never find it without my cooperation, and I won't give it to you until I see my daughter and know that she is all right. You are a stubborn man, Mr. Donovan, the Mexican said slowly. I am a determined man, Rod told him. He knew there was a gun. It was not in evidence, but it was there. He was not certain how he knew it, but his consciousness of its presence was a sharp reality in the dreamlike shadows of the quiet church. He could shoot me, Rod thought. He could shoot me now and take the car keys and go. Later, somehow, he could open the car trunk, pry it, dynamite it, get it open somehow. He does not need me. There was, however, the fact of those adobe houses, the fact that it was Sunday and people would be home, eating their dinners, playing with their children. The sound of a pistol shot echoing forth from the church could be heard in those houses, or by anyone walking or driving along the street outside. It was a risk, and this man was not going to take risks, not with $60,000. Rod regarded him squarely. Will you take me? I will give you the money as soon as I see that Marianne is safe. The man shifted his shoulders in a shrug. As you like. Let's go then. They left the church together, moving side by side down the narrow aisle and out into the sunlight. After the darkness, the shattering brilliance of the snow-laden world burst upon them with blinding intensity. Squinting his eyes against the glare, Rod led the way across the road to where his car stood, parked on the siding. He opened the car door, then hesitated. Do you want me to drive? One moment, please. With practiced dexterity or skill, the man reached over and ran his hands down the outside of Rod's jacket, over the chest and pockets, under the armpits, then down the trousers, over the hips, along the inside of the legs to the ankles. With a sense of relief, Rod silently thanked heaven for the impulse that had made him leave the pistol behind him when he went into the church. He tried to smile wryly. Satisfied that I'm not carrying anything? You may get in now. You do the driving. I'll tell you where. The man came around and got in on the far side, in the seat next to the driver. Rod put the key in the ignition and started the engine. He pulled off the siding onto the road. Which way? Straight. I'll tell you where to turn off. The man leaned back against the seat. His right hand was in his pocket. Rod pressed gently upon the accelerator. The car moved forward through the village, past the houses. A few moments, and all signs of civilization fell away behind them, and there was nothing on either side but snow-covered bushes and naked trees against the blue sky. It was a beautiful day, cold, clear, a day for skiing, a day for sleds and snowball fights and family picnics. They had had a picnic 2 weeks before on Jackie's birthday. Rod had gotten him a plastic disc for sliding, and another for Jay, even though his birthday was not until springtime. And they had driven up into the mountains until they had reached the spot where the snow started, and there was a dip off the side of the road, just right for sliding. They had gone, the four of them, Rod and Marian and the two little boys. Marianne had not come with them. She had said she had to study. He could remember her face, set in stubborn lines, the softness and delicacy belied by obstinacy. I'm sorry, Mother. I have too much to do here at home. She had not fooled them. She had not even meant to. She had been striking out, hurting as she herself had been hurt. Her eyes had flicked past Rod, ignoring him, as though by refusing to acknowledge his existence, she could transplant him back into that hazy limbo that his life had been before he forced his unwanted way into their family. I have homework to do, she had said. And after that, of course, I have to write to Daddy. Even now, Rod could feel the pain catch at his chest with the memory not so much of the neatly addressed envelopes lying weakly on the hall table, waiting to go out in the morning mail, as of the fact that the hopeful epistles or letters were never answered. Marianne, he thought now. Blast it all, Marianne, you crazy, stubborn, faithful-hearted little idiot. The road had narrowed, and they were climbing steeply. Rod glanced at the mileage gauge, wishing that he had checked it when they first started. His guess was that they had come about 8 miles since the village, but it was difficult to judge distance on a road so winding. The man next to him noticed his glance, for he said, There is still a good way to go. You turn left at the side road up there. At what? Rod's eyes scanned the woods to the left, searching vainly for some form of fork. At the side road, up there ahead, that's the turnoff. Then he saw it, the narrow trail leading steeply upward from the road on which they were now traveling. Rod's eyes narrowed suspiciously. That's not a road, it's just a hunting trail. You ask me the way. The man regarded him with a hint of amusement. I tell you the way. What's the matter? You don't want to see the girl after all? A car can't make that incline. It levels off a little, the man said, after you get up there. Rod swung the car to the left, shifted into first, and bore down hard upon the accelerator. For a moment, he did not think they were going to make it. I should have chains on the car, he thought. Sweetie. So sorry about that, guys. My son was just getting a snack. Anyway, for a moment, he did not think that they were going to make it. I should have chains on the car, he thought. If I hadn't been in such a hurry leaving, I could have put them on. The car lurched forward, groaning, and the tires slid and then caught, holding them suspended for an instant. Then slowly and with an infinite agony, the car settled itself to the hard pull upward. As his companion had told him, after the initial steepness, Rod found that the road leveled off and began a steady, winding upgrade. It was apparent also that it had been used recently by at least one automobile, for the trail was clear of branches, and in places the older snow was marked by tire tracks. The silence of the woodland settled around them, a heavy, muffled quiet, accentuating the sense of isolation and filling Rod with a sharp awareness of the fact that there were now no villagers, no casual bypassers, no one in any direction who would hear a shot should one be fired. Worriedly, he contemplated the distance he would have to reach to grasp the pistol secreted beneath the seat, and the extra time it would take to draw it out of its nesting place between the springs and bring it into action. Too long, he thought, much too long to make it even worth attempting. He would simply have to pray that having come this far, his companion would decide to take him the rest of the way to whatever end lay ahead, and that wherever their destination, Mary Ann would be there. And then suddenly, at the same instant, they both saw the boy. They rounded a curve, and he was there before them, a tall, sturdy figure in a black leather jacket, limping slightly as he plodded down the center of the trail. For a moment, Rod could not believe his eyes, and then he gave a gasp of amazement. Who is it, guys? It's Glenn, isn't it? It's one of the Kirtland boys, the one who dates my daughter. The man beside him seemed equally startled. With a muttered oath, he straightened in his seat. Stop the car! Before them, Glenn Kirtland stood frozen, his eyes wide in shock at the sight of the automobile and the two men in it. As Rod's foot struck the brake pedal, his companion swung the right-hand door open and, half rising to a standing position, thrust his head and shoulders out above the upper rim of the door frame. So Rod is half out of the car, just as his top half is out of the door frame. Hold it, he shouted. Hold it where you are, kid. You come here to the car, kid, and don't make funny business while you are about it. In the excitement of the moment, his accent deepened, and turning sideways, Rod saw that his right hand was no longer in his pocket, but was raised and directed at the boy on the road ahead of them. At the same instant, he realized that the man's full attention was upon the boy, and without stopping to contemplate or think about the possible result of his action, Rod made a quick and desperate lurch for the rip in the seat. Bending forward, he thrust his hand into it wrist deep until his fingers closed around the butt of the pistol, and with a violent wrench pulled it upward past the springs. He straightened. It had taken only seconds. The boy was still standing there. The man seemed not to have moved from his half-standing position. With the gun in his hands, Rod hesitated for an instant. Mary Ann was still not with them. Until he saw Mary Ann, he could not afford to do anything that might leave him stranded, unable to find her. With a second quick motion, he dropped the pistol into his oversized overcoat pocket and placed his hand back upon the wheel of the car. For a moment, he had thought that Glenn was going to bolt for cover. But the moment was past, and the boy seemed to know it. His eyes on the pistol in Juan's hand, he came slowly and resignedly to the car. Looking past Juan, his gaze settled hostilely upon Rod. "What are you doing here?" he asked tersely. "I have come to bail you out," Rod answered, fighting emotion with brusqueness. "Where is Mary Ann? Where did you leave her? Is she all right?" "She's up at the cabin." Glenn's face was dark with anger. "What did you have to come for? I was away, free, blast it. None of the others could do it, but I did. Another couple of miles and I would have been at the village. I could have called the police from there. I'd have saved us." "I couldn't know," Rod said helplessly. "You didn't have any right coming, bringing the ransom. I didn't want anybody paying ransom to get me out of anything. I could have done it myself, saved all of them. It would have been in the paper, all about it." His voice was thick with bitterness. Looking at him, Rod thought, he is just a boy. He is exhausted. He doesn't realize what he is saying. "Get into the car, son," he said gently. "I'm sorry, I could not have known. All I wanted was to get you all home safe." "Safe," the boy muttered. "Sure you did. And I came all this way, twisted my ankle, practically froze to death for nothing. Nothing. Juan swung the car door open and stepped out, his hand secure upon the pistol. Wordlessly, he motioned Glenn into the front seat and then opened the rear door and climbed in behind them. I should have fired, Rod thought, when I could have. I should have shot him here, right here in the snow, with the gun in my hand and his attention elsewhere. Because now he is behind us and I can't turn. As the boy says, I am fouling up everything. Sweetie? I know. How did it happen? Juan asked the question quietly. Can you take it in the other room, though, hon? Thank you. How did you get away from the cabin? Are the others free also? Come, tell me. I will find out soon anyway. We ran, Glenn said lifelessly. The rest of them? They also ran? They are outside in the snow someplace? The girls are back at the cabin. Dexter, I don't know, Buck shot at him. And the other boy, your brother? He went back to the cabin. Glenn's voice was shaking with weariness and frustration. I got away. I was the one, the only one. I should have been the one to rescue them. It's all right, son, Rod said gently. You tried. The full irony of the situation was heavy upon him. Here they were on the way to the hideout, the cabin from which Glenn had fled a matter of hours before. If he had not come at all, Glenn would have completed his escape to the village, and from there would have called for help without Juan's knowledge. But what was done, and they were on their way to the cabin. And in a short time he would see Mary Ann again, for whatever help his presence could be to her. If I only had the money, he thought helplessly. If I could only open the trunk and hand it out to them and take the children and go. But he did have the pistol, and if necessary, he would use it. This knowledge alone was strong within him. He was a gentle man, and he had never fired a pistol in his life. But with Mary Ann's safety at stake, he would not hesitate to do so. Whatever was to come now, he would do what he could. Somehow, he would see to it that Mary Ann got away and home again. He would do what he could and pray to God that it would somehow be enough. They started slowly up the road down which Glenn had just come. So maybe if you feel anything for Glenn, you're like, so close, Glenn, so close. So now they're going back to the cabin with Juan, who has a gun. But Rod has a gun too. Will he use it or won't he? We'll have to wait and see.